areas of consideration in building resiliency and by no means complete are: first, investments in airport and seaport resilience. Second, investments in energy resilience by completing the underground cabling program and by investing in renewable energy generation such as solar. Third, investing in environmental protection by implementing sustainable waste management solutions. Fourth, investments in communications resilience, considering the importance of communication for disaster management and for the operation of economies in the digital age. And fifth, improving social resilience by investing in the resiliency of the population and properties in underprivileged neighborhoods. Ladies and gentlemen, it is evident that there is no quick fix to building economic resiliency. It can, however, be concluded that the challenge we face after Irma holds within it the opportunity to invest in the enhancement of our socio-economic resilience, and with that, the improvement of the well-being of our population. It holds within it the opportunity to set our sails and plan for sustainable recovery and development. Investing in socio-economic resilience and sustainability is also the best approach to bridging the financing gap we face as a country and a region. Ladies and gentlemen, in closing, I would like to leave you with the following thoughts. Hurricane Irma caused losses in GDP of 13% over 2017 and 2018, and a loss of average individual income of some $2,500 US. Going forward, and all things being equal, if the economy grows by 1%, it will take us 13 years to make up the loss. If the economy grows by 2%, it will take us over 6.5 years to make up the loss. And if the economy grows by 3%, it will take over four years to make up the losses. It is evident that we, all of us, government, businesses, and individuals, must take steps to make our country a more resilient place against the impact of external shocks. I am, in that regard, encouraged by the efforts of government to work in cooperation with NGOs and in partnership and with support from the Netherlands and the World Bank. It is, as such, in view of the imperative to build economic resilience for sustainable economic recovery, that I organized this symposium. I therefore look forward to hearing the views of the keynote speaker and featured speakers, as well as our Prime Minister, and your questions on this relevant topic for St. Martin and the region. That, as we navigate our way to rebuild and recover, for in the words of Ella Wheeler Wilcox, it is the set of the sails and not the gales which tells us the way to go. With that, I hereby declare this symposium open and wish you an enjoyable and fruitful symposium. Thank you, God bless you, and may God bless St. Martin and protect its coast.
Have you all ever had the feeling when you are talking about something over and over again, and then you hear other people talk about it, and you actually want to get up and say, I told you so. I told you so. That's exactly how I feel today. Well, first I would like to commend His Excellency Governor Eugene Holliday for the organizing of this symposium on the topic, Shaping Sustainable Economic Recovery in the Caribbean, Challenges and Opportunities. This subject could not have been at a more fitting choice given the current economic challenges we are faced with at this time as a small island development state within the Caribbean region. As I begin this afternoon, I would like you to consider that in the formulation of policies and strategies towards ensuring sustainable economic recovery, one has to be very cognizant or aware of what our challenges really are. Once identified, it is only then can appropriate measures, policies, programs, and initiatives be designed to circumvent or mitigate the challenges of our future development. As you know, there are many challenges. However, I have chosen to briefly comment on a few that I consider to be valuable to our discussions at this symposium. Before I introduce some of those challenges, it goes without saying that these challenges are also that these challenges also produce the fertile ground for new opportunities and innovation. So later in my address, I will also elucidate on some of those possible innovations and opportunities. Climate change is no longer a discussion exclusive to scientists, professors, and scholars of top universities and tech companies around the world. As we gathered here as a result of the severe impact of the 2017 hurricane season, the discussion on climate change has made its way through the halls of government and its emergency services. Climate change has also touched the hearts and minds of our people in the Caribbean diaspora. For all of us in this region, as small island developing states that are very minuscule in this equation of carbon emissions and other factors that deter normal climate, we have to be cognizant of its impact to our individual economies. Located in the hurricane belt of the region, confronted with rising sea levels, varying trends of hurricanes, extreme period of dryness and extreme rainfall are all consequences of climate change or global warming. These occurrences or attributes of global warming can have negative impact on our economy and society on a whole. For this reason, it would be rather imperative for all of us to be responsible and take the necessary preventative or mitigating measures to curb the negative impact of such occurrences. These measures may include the protecting of our environment through proper legislation and its enforcement, proper waste disposal initiatives, including recycling and banning of plastics, the protecting of our wetland areas, protecting of maritime life, and the use of more environment-friendly products wherever possible, just to name a few. For the commercial sector, apart from the already mentioned, it would also involve a shift in the way we do business and a willingness to adopt innovative methods that contribute to a sustainable environment. These simple measures, ladies and gentlemen, coupled with proper communication of the effectiveness of going green initiatives, would definitely ensure some form of economic resilience and sustainability. Another challenge that we are facing is what I would like to characterize as dependency syndrome. This is how I categorize or term our heavy and increasing reliance on the external front for economic sustenance, be it oil and oil products, be it food, be it guests to our island. As in the case of our beautiful island, this heavy reliance has ever so often exposed our vulnerability to external shocks, which can negatively affect our economy and well-being. Let us take, for example, any increase of oil prices on the world market affects the island negatively from increased operating costs for businesses, which is then passed on to the consumer. This in turn reduces consumers' disposable income through inflation, creating that anxiety and uneasiness in the economy, thereby stifling overall growth and production of the economy. Negative external shocks such as terrorism, health epidemics, economic recessions, and political instability. In the case of terrorism, this can deter persons from traveling to the island, thus crippling the country's revenues. Outbreak of health epidemics in our region also affect the revenues and smooth economic operations. As for economic recession and political instability, these can be considered as a self-explanatory since they are capable of distorting the economic equilibrium.
I think that it's time for us to think about catastrophic bonds in a different way. How about if we have a bond whereby we have investors who give us money and we use the proceeds from those resources to build resilience? But if there's a catastrophe that leads to some disability where it relates to that infrastructure, we get a moratorium on capital and interest payments. So instead of only paying insurance, which you may not use, you can still use the proceeds to help you build resilience. For me, that makes good sense for the government, because you get the funds to build your resilience. It makes great sense for the private sector, because their resources are actually being built to reduce the risk that they have in that country. And of course, it makes good sense from a development perspective. If there's a problem, we need to give a moratorium on interest and capital payments. Tahseen, I think we should discuss that at some point. So on building, we have to also consider how we build resilience at the household and the business level, and microcredit and MFI insurance, I think, are things we have to look at. And we need to explore new financial instruments. And this just gives you a broad overview of some of the areas that I think we in the Caribbean have to look at. A particularly important area for us here is blue bonds now. We think that around us, the ocean provides us with a significant amount of opportunities. Remember, I told you we have to see how we turn our risks into opportunities, our vulnerabilities. I think the ocean around us, we're not capitalizing enough on that. And we have to find ways of putting finance in there to turn things around. So I'm just going to end here now to give you a bit of a, I couldn't come here to St. Martin and not try to sell the Caribbean Development Bank to some extent. So, Governor Holiday, 2 years' time, I want you to be a member. So financial instruments. Here are some of the products that we have. If you were ever in difficulty, we immediately provide you with some money to help you with your cleanup exercises. We have grants for all of our borrowing member countries up to about $200,000 initially. And then we have recovery loans that you can get. And then we also have exogenous policy-based loan shocks that you can get access to. And we've provided those to the British Virgin Islands and Anguilla since the hurricanes of 2017. I would have loved to have done that for you in St. Martin as well. And just to say that we do have a problem, however, in the development community, whereby where can we provide concessional resources to our countries? As you can see there, only Haiti has access regularly to grant resources. But the reason why we developed that multidimensional vulnerability index is to say that our countries have a problem. We might seem economically secure, but that economic security is quite tentative.
Within this framework, our new engagement from the World Bank Group side and is with St. Martin, of course, where the Netherlands government had requested and engaged with us to partner with them and with the government and with the people of St. Martin to work towards delivering over $500 million of recovery and reconstruction trust fund, which is already under implementation. Beyond the trust fund, the World Bank is in the entire Caribbean countries. We have about over $2.5 billion, $2+ billion worth of financing portfolio, about 50 or so projects in the region. Let me talk a bit about the fiscal and financial resilience. I want to mention 2 points here. One is the examples that I already quoted. There are how does one deal with the guests who were unwanted but who are in your country, and they are there not only because of the external unwanted guests, but there are certain domestic issues that may have led to that kind of situation, and that I'm talking about the high debt issues that many of our countries face. So there are the efforts for better fiscal management, the other side of it, a better regulatory framework to attract more private sector. I do have to say it very frankly and very honestly that one of the key areas ever since I have been involved in this position at the World Bank over 2.5 years ago, where I have not been able to make a big dent, is bringing private sector investments into the small island states. And there is a lot of issue there. One issue, of course, is the question of the doing business indicators, the regulatory framework, how easy, you said it's more difficult than West Bank and Gaza, but those are areas where countries can actually make progress and take actions. It is within the control of the countries. And regional bodies can help, such as the political level, of course, is CARICOM, but in the Eastern Caribbean, there's also the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, which is helping to play that role in improving the business environment. The other part is really linking to the global standards of what is known as the Financial Action Task Force, the anti-money laundering related activities. And I'm very, very pleased to mention here today that we have offered to St. Martin from the World Bank side to engage and help them to develop their own data sets and their own systems leading up to necessary laws and legislation to avoid getting in any future gray or black lists, which is an issue for many of the small states of the Caribbean. And we have already offered a national risk assessment support. We are doing it, I have to say, in 17 out of the 19 countries. We are already engaged on that work, and we hope to do that also at very little cost. It's really not an expensive thing. It's more technical and advisory work.
There are a number of plans that this resiliency plan contain, and these plans cover areas such as sustainable recovery for social sectors in affected communities. 2, the restoration of business continuity. 3, the rehabilitation and reconstruction of critical infrastructure, and most importantly, 4, the strengthening of our country's readiness to mitigate, respond, and recover from future impacts of natural disasters and climate change. I was asked to focus my presentation today on implementation perspective within the broader theme of this symposium. What will it take for our country, St. Martin, which is a small island state, to implement recovery and development projects that require no less capacity than similar projects of countries with better access to different markets and who often have a larger human capital? So how do we do it? How others do it. Let us start by addressing the question and looking at examples from within our region, taking the Dominican Republic as this example. The Dominican Republic implements a World Bank portfolio of 5 projects, including totaling $575 million in sectors similar to ours. These sectors are resilience, education, social protection, and water management. The Dominican Republic uses different implementation units, such units for each individual project, and in some cases has both a coordination unit and an implementation unit in place. This mix of coordination unit, like the NRPB, working with a separate implementation unit, is used by St. Martin for the Hospital Resilience and Reconstruction Project. And we are exploring similar arrangements in the Airport Terminal Reconstruction Project. The hospital project is implemented by the hospital, and the airport project will be implemented by the airport with the NRPB as a coordinating unit. The main difference between St. Martin and the Dominican Republic is that neither the NRPB or other implementation units have any prior experience in implementing donor projects with the World Bank. Also, the Bureau is not only a coordination unit, it is also implementing and preparing a series of other projects. There are no differences in terms of World Bank procedures and requirements that apply. Even though St. Martin is a single donor trust fund recipient, while the Dominican Republic is a borrowing country with an established relationship with the World Bank. The bank fiduciary and safeguard standards and procedures are the same. These are there to ensure the countries achieve their development objective with integrity and in a sustainable manner. Middle-income countries in the European Union, such as Croatia, Poland, Romania, and Bulgaria, implement similar World Bank finance projects using different units for each project within their line ministries. Every project implementation unit has its own director, procurement and financial experts, environmental and social specialists, as well as several technical advisors. In preparing and executing projects, these units, like the NRPB, benefit from bank support and expertise throughout the life cycle of these projects. Countries implement their programs through different governmental models, including setting up a totally separate and autonomous entities and creating, implementing, coordinating units within the government structure.
Looking at fiscal resilience and what our fiscal trajectory looks like. So IRMA-related expenditure was estimated at 2% of GDP in 2017, while the total fiscal deficit was 3.5%. And while the membership in the CRIF will provide some buffers, clearly we need some help here to make sure that we have enough that we need. So we need to be able to consistently be fiscally prudent. And I just wanted to compare St. Martin against some of the other countries in the region. The public sector wage bill in St. Martin is actually above the regional average. The IMF, for example, had recommended reducing the cost of politics in St. Martin. In order to bring this down to the regional average or below the regional average. So yeah, the public sector wage bill is a big part of it. So we need to look at that. We need to look at the public sector spending on goods and services as well, because the government spends on average 6.45% of GDP on goods and services, which is the third highest in the region, and which is well above the regional average of 5%. So that's something we need to look at as well. And in terms of spending on subsidies, it's been steadily growing as a proportion of GDP, now up to 6% of GDP. Now that isn't that bad compared to countries like Trinidad, but it's still on an upward trajectory, and it's something that we would want to keep an eye on and think about in terms of sustainability. Now, at 7.7% of GDP, the public pension fund and social insurance, as at September last year, was twice the government's liquidity position, and this violated the fiscal framework. So in terms of the arrears there, we need to think about how we manage that going forward. But we have to look at also this, the fiscal rules and this framework, and how does it serve us here in St. Martin? And perhaps this is another area that we can think of in terms of reform. So the rule is no current budget deficits. But we have arrears that have accumulated over time in terms of current budget deficits. Interest payments are capped at 5% of fiscal revenue. But the thing is, as we borrow more to recover from these storms, the cost of your borrowing goes up. If your credit rating drops, the cost of your borrowing goes up. And are we ready, and are we willing to access the international credit markets that could possibly drive us over this, to basically break this rule? And we're supposed to borrow only for capital spending. Now, the thing about it is, how does that speak to natural disaster recovery? And that's something I think we need to look at. And there is no long-term anchor for debt to GDP, which, as Justin had mentioned, there was a paper done by Greenwich and et al. Some years ago that found anywhere between 55 to 56% debt to GDP in this region. Debt then becomes unsustainable, and each additional dollar of debt actually causes your GDP to contract. It actually puts downward pressure on GDP. So we need to have a debt anchor, I think, established for St. Martin.